Good morning. It is 6:37 a.m. on Monday, July 3rd, 2017. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. Today is actually Luna's oncologist appointment, which is going to be a little bit later this morning. And I've already decided that although today is not an official holiday, being the Monday before July 4th, which is tomorrow, which is a holiday, I'm just going to go ahead and make it a 4-day weekend. But what I'm going to talk about today is that yesterday I went to see Baby Driver, which I had previously mentioned on these videos as being excited to see. And I did really like it, although I feel like I want to watch it again now that I have a better idea of like what it is exactly. It was a little different than I expected, I loved it. So please don't take any criticism as anything less than thoughtful analysis of a movie that I really enjoyed. Because I definitely don't want this to come across as damning with faint praise when I talk a little bit about differences between what it is and what my expectation was, because it's really great, and in fact what I am left feeling mostly is that I want to see it again. So that said, it was a little different than kind of what I was expecting based on Edgar Wright's previous filmography. For one, something that's not necessarily obvious from the trailers at all, although many of the pull quotes and blurbs and so on kind of bring up this effect, is that the movie is sort of a non-traditional musical in the sense that the characters are not singing, but music just embodies the whole movie. It plays into pretty much everything that's happening, and that's all sort of presented through the eyes and ears of the main character, Baby, who's basically the premise is that he has tinnitus, chronic tinnitus, from an accident when he was a kid, and so he listens to the music to drown it out. But what that kind of means effectively is that we've got music going pretty much the whole time, and that almost everything kind of happening around is frequently kind of almost like in tune or on the beat with the music. And I spotted it early on in the opening scene, but I think that I got the feeling of having only scratched the surface. And I think that's part of what was leaving me feeling like I need to see it again to fully appreciate how much of that's going on. Because I guess I wasn't necessarily expecting that aspect of it. Because one of the things that characterizes Edgar Wright's other movies is often very flashy, stylized filmmaking. And I just recently rewatched Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is an especially strong example of this. That movie, because it is based on a graphic novel, and the graphic novel itself influenced by video games, there's just tons and tons of graphic novel and video game visual homages and motifs in that. And the way it just rapid fire cuts from one scene to the next, it's very stylized and very cool. And that's something that was kind of a more extreme version of something he's always done in his movies, which is lots of flash cuts and sort of fancy film editing tricks to add meaning. And so I was kind of expecting something more like that, and it's really less like that and more focused on sort of traditional film storytelling, but with this musical layer. This won't make any sense until you see the movie, but spread all the way to the edges. And so it's just there in every part of the movie, and in fact, it's always notable when there's no music going. It's always significant and meant to feel like, oh, this is different. So I really like it. It's funny in many places, but it's also a lot less of a most of Edgar Wright's other movies tend to be comedies with a bit of character drama kind of layered in. Excuse me. Goodness. This one is funny in many places, but it's more of an action thriller type of story with a little bit of romance in there. And it's less a comedy. I mean, I think that all of his other movies I would call comedies, and this one I would not. That said, it's very funny in many places. And boy, I, I I think again, it's like my hesitation is just that it was different than what I expected, and so sort of feel like I opened the door and just discovered that the room inside was so much bigger than I thought, and I couldn't see it all through the doorway. And I'll have to really wander in uh, and spend some leisure time there in order to fully appreciate everything. The other analogy that kind of came to mind was, whereas previous some of his directorial choices in other movies that would be what I would call flashy. In this case, it's not flashy, and yet you get it in the sunlight. Well, I was the analogy I was just going to make had an unfortunate superficial overlap with the Twilight stories, which was not intentional. I was going to say get it into the sunlight and it just glitters. You realize that you just have to put it under the right light, and it's just covered with these little tiny sparkles everywhere. And so while it wasn't as obviously ostentatious at first glance, it's all there to be found when you really examine it. And I meant no connection to Twilight vampires. So in any case, I really liked it, and I am eager to see it again and get a sense, spend a little more luxury time with it. So I definitely recommend, and I think it is probably good to go in. Also, one thing I'll note, because I've talked about this, is that when I previously had complained about the title being a weird title that doesn't convey what the movie is about, I was unaware that there was a song called Baby Driver from Simon and Garfunkel, something that I found out just actually before seeing the movie. And then the song itself is on over the end credits, and it seems obvious that it's a direct reference both in the idea that in that song we talk about a kid who's not only good at driving, they call him Baby Driver, and he was born with music in his ears. So it seems, not it's not a superficial connection to that song. And so in some ways I partially retract my complaints, but in the other sense, I mean, I'm not a total musical dunce, and I'm aware of Simon and Garfunkel, but I still didn't know that song, and I can't imagine that there is a huge, what percentage of the people that he's hoping are going to see this movie know that song? My guess is it's low. So, I guess I don't hate it necessarily, because the whole thing is kind of built around that title, but I feel like if you don't know anything about Edgar Wright, you haven't seen any previews, you hear the words Baby Driver and you think it's like Baby's Day Out, or it's one of those dumb kids movies, Baby Geniuses or whatever. So that's my only complaint. But I guess, maybe I need to stop worrying about what other people will think about the movie. In any case, I like the movie. I think it's great, and I feel like I need further viewings in order to fully appreciate it. So, that's it for now, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow for 5 more minutes.